Welcome to Remix EQ Live, where we are amplifying equity with a remix of information, interviews, and inspiration. I'm your host, Dr. Erika Tate, and today I am broadcasting live from Savannah, Georgia, where I live. For those joining us today, please drop a greeting of choice in the comments. Hello, what's up? How are you doing today? Let us know where you are joining from and the equity work that you do or aspire to do. And remember, Remix EQ is an experience that's meant to be shared. So I encourage you to hit the share and invite buttons and bring along your people, your network, your family, your friends, your peeps to join our Remix EQ community today. While those comments are flowing in and those invitations are flowing out, I want to remind you that Remix EQ Live offers the opportunity for us to connect and build community with each other around the equity work being performed throughout the world. And we do this by centering the work. That is, our guests and viewers share examples of what they do in their role or position as a way to illustrate the innovative and effective ways they advance equity in the spaces in which they live, work, and play. So, throughout the show and in the comments, I invite you to also share what you do to make the world a more just place. Today is the season 3 finale of Remix EQ Live. Yes, y'all. Can you believe it? It has been 3 seasons, 24 shows, 24 guests, 24 opportunities for us to connect with professionals who center equity in their work on the show and in our growing Remix EQ community. And we also have the chance to listen and learn from each other about why and how to make the world a more just place. For those new to Remix EQ Live, usually I sit down with one or two amazing guests and ask them to describe the twists and turns in their professional and personal lives that have led them to their current positions. We engage in reflective dialogue about their identities and lived experiences, and they share stories and examples that showcase the perspectives, practices, and tools that guide their work. Today's show is our community reflections format, where I show up solo to hold space for us to reflect together, which is necessary for us to sustain this critical work. And today we are reflecting on the principles and practices that guide our pursuit of justice in the communities we serve. Oh, hello. Hey, Emily Payne. Welcome back. She says, good morning from Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. And good morning to you, Emily Payne. Thank you for joining us today. In a recent community reflections show, we reflected on origin stories, the backstory of seemingly ordinary people who come into their powers, don their capes, and accept responsibility to save the world from evil. You are the seemingly ordinary people who work to make the world a more just place. The evil is injustice, which we named as oppression. All the isms, discrimination, structural barriers, inequities, gaps, lack of representation. The list is many. And your origin story could either be pivotal, a standout experience that compelled you into action, or serial, a set of events, interactions, or observations throughout your life that nudged or pushed you to begin or shift your pursuit of justice. Today, I want to reflect with you on your powers, which are the perspectives, practices, and principles that guide your work and interactions with the communities you serve. Since the start of this year, I've been working to grow the inclusive evaluation service line of my business. With these services, we support mission driven organizations to generate evidence of impact and tell stories about how they change the people and places they serve. And to achieve this business development goal, it requires a lot of information gathering, experimenting with different service offerings, speaking about how evaluation can be an empowering tool for improving and growing an organization. But one planning activity I really enjoyed was generating a set of guiding principles for conducting an inclusive evaluation. And I love this work for many reasons. One, it was collaborative. I did this with my team. We reviewed over a decade of our community inquiry, evaluation, and advocacy projects to glean themes in terms of objectives, participants, methodologies, and outcomes. I also love this work because it was reflective. We synthesized these themes into guiding principles by considering questions like, why was this work important or necessary for us to do? What did we take into consideration when planning, implementing, and reporting this work? And who benefited from this work? And finally, I love this work because it was creative. We codified and articulated our approaches, our practices, the lessons we've learned to generate a set of principles to guide our work forward. And I'd love to share our three guiding principles for conducting an inclusive evaluation as an example for you to consider when reflecting on the perspectives, practices, principles that guide your work to make the world a more just place. So, guiding principle number one, center community experiences. Define your focal community, participants, key stakeholders. And this could look like a neighborhood with a specific zip code, or parents of small children, or families in low wealth neighborhoods. And also apply critical frameworks and lenses that make visible your focal community's lived experiences, including their powered relationships and their intersectional narratives. So, we are going to dive into this guiding principle a little later in the show. And guiding principle number two, amplify community voice. Design respectful and responsive data collection methodologies that consider the perspectives of the participants and stakeholders and how they feel or what it takes for them to complete the survey you administer or participate in your interviews or come out to your community forums. Also, communicate the experiences and narratives of those who have been historically excluded, marginalized, minoritized, othered, ignored, muted, or silenced. Yes, I know this is a long list, but just as I listed the multiple ways to name or describe injustice earlier, I offer this long list to bring attention and underscore the multiple ways a person can be made to feel less than, or as if they do not belong, or if they do not have human rights. The more nuanced we are with naming injustice and unjust practices, the more nuanced and responsive and respectful our pursuits of justice can become. And guiding principle number three, empower meaningful participation. Position communities, participants, stakeholders as experts in their lived experiences and invite them to contribute to the evaluation planning, implementation, and communication, and to utilize the findings to benefit their communities. We want to ensure that our community members are not just beneficiaries of the programs and services we provide. We want to consider how can we invite them to participate as contributors and even decision makers. Community members are experts in their lived experiences, their circumstances, and their desires for their futures. These three guiding principles for conducting an inclusive evaluation influence the frameworks we apply, the questions we ask, the methodologies we engage in, the conclusions we draw, and even how and with whom we share our findings. And something to note here is while these guiding principles are focused on our inclusive evaluation services, I definitely connect these principles to frameworks I apply in my design and study of learning experiences, and even in the community building within our Remix EQ community. And this is not a coincidence. My origin story, my experiences, both personal and professional, not only compel me to do this work, but also inform and inspire how I do this work. So these guiding principles are an example that capture and communicate how my organization works to make the world a more just place. And I invite you to share your guiding principles with our Remix EQ community in the comments. So, for those who are just joining us, this is Remix EQ Live, and we're amplifying equity through a remix of information, interviews, and inspiration. So, thank you for sharing and inviting others to tune in. And of course, I invite you to keep interacting with me and each other. Make sure you post comments, ask questions, just say, hello, I am here. As we continue our community reflection show, and thinking about the guiding principles and practices that shape our pursuits of equity. You are part of this Remix EQ Live experience. So, I shared my three guiding principles for conducting an inclusive evaluation. And now I want to spend a little bit of time unpacking the first principle with you, which was centering community experiences. And to do this, I'll prompt you to consider two different aspects of this principle and share examples from our Remix EQ Live episodes to either add to or push your thinking about how you work to make the world a more just place. So let's begin. Which communities are the focus of your work and why? So, focal communities are also referred to as target communities or participants. They are the people, the places that you center in your work. And these communities can be defined by history, geography, race, gender, interest, profession, or the intersection of all these identities and more. So, for example, in our advocacy episode, Alicia Johnson centers on low wealth neighborhoods defined by redlining practices. And guests Iodeli Harrison and Dr. Christopher Small center on Black men pursuing educational leadership in schools and communities. Three of our episodes featuring Doctors Brandeis Marshall, Kyla McGullen, Jaquita Thomas, and Yolanda Rankin center on Black women in computing and data. So feel free to share your focal communities with us and let us know why and how you serve these communities. Add to our body of knowledge. And of course, I encourage you to tune into all the Remix EQ Live episodes for more examples of focal communities and how our Remix EQ Live guests have studied, supported, and empowered the communities they serve. And the second aspect of our guiding principle number one, centering community experience, focuses on critical frames. So the prompt I have for you to consider is which critical frames guide your work? And of course, I invite you to add your frames, your insights, your examples into the comments and to share with our Remix EQ community. We apply critical frames to focus or bring attention to what we believe matters the most for the communities we serve, their histories, their narratives, their language, their cultural or even physical resources. Frames bound what we see. It doesn't matter. It doesn't mean that what sits beyond the frames does not exist or even influence what's happening within the frame. It is a decision that is informed by our lived experiences, our learning throughout our life, and our expectations for us to narrow our scope in order to identify or even amplify what we believe to be the most salient factors, relationships, connections, intersections, happenings, and outcomes. And critical frames bring power into view. For example, in our philanthropy episode, Tesmer Asbeha applies a reparative justice frame in her discussion of grant making. She brings to the forefront that systems of power, such as racism and capitalism, contribute to the excessive accumulation of wealth by a few individuals or families, which in turn necessitates philanthropy. Dr. Kathy Anderson, a guest on our medicine show, applies a cultural safety frame to her practice of pediatric medicine, which considers the power differential between provider and patient. In his discussion of educational leadership, Dr. Tracy Benson puts forth an anti racism frame to make clear that structural racism is the root cause of inequities in our schools. And in order to achieve equitable outcomes in education, we must first acknowledge and address racism. During our Black Women in Computing episode, Doctors Jaquita Thomas and Yolanda Rankin applied Black feminist epistemologies to bring attention to Black women's intersectional identities and the gendered racism and multiple oppressions within computing education and career spaces. They also amplify narratives of resistance to these powered experiences. And recent guest Deepa Iyer engages in solidarity as a critical practice for actively connecting across communities with different oppressive histories toward the common goal of justice. So I offer this sample of critical frames to inform your reflection. This list is not at all exhaustive, so please feel free to add the critical frames that you are applying or thinking about applying in your work and post them in the comments or consider them in more depth during your personal journaling time. And I want to highlight that frames place boundaries on what we see, listen for, and address. And if we can view frames as less limiting and more clarifying, then we begin to understand their purpose. Just as it is necessary to name the injustice you are resisting, it is also important to name the frameworks you apply. It helps others understand your impetus, your intent, your language, your methodologies, your interpretations, and your outcomes. And it facilitates our dialogue with each other and supports more powerful conversations for change. So, as we close out today's community reflection show and the third season of Remix EQ Live, I want to say thank you. I appreciate you tuning in and showing up, adding your comments, questions, and experiences to our community over 3 seasons. You make this happen. And I consider Remix EQ a professional learning community where we connect across time and space because everybody is everywhere all the time. And it is an opportunity for us to fellowship, to listen and learn from each other, and engage in personal and collective reflection about our work, what brings us to it, and what sustains us. Together, We are extraordinary people who are committed to honing our powers. That is, the perspectives, practices, principles, and our truths in order to make the world a more just place. And we will be back for season 4 at the end of July. We already have amazing guests lined up. And along the way, we will share Remix EQ live clips and playlists to continue these powerful conversations for change. Also, on May 25th, I'm taking the stage at TEDx Savannah to speak about connection. So, if you are in the Savannah area, I'd love for you to come out and support. And if not, or you can't make it, I will share live stream details with you as well as the video when it becomes available. So, watch your feed, check your inbox, and visit the Remix EQ Live webpage for episode recordings and more information about our inspiring guests and upcoming events. And also discover new ways to support the Remix EQ community via donation or purchasing merch like our Amplified notebook. And while you are on the show's webpage, please poke around the website and learn more about my business, Blue Knowledge, and our growing family of brands and services, which advance equity in schools and communities. You can also follow us on LinkedIn. And of course, I invite you to connect with me here too. Thank you, Remix EQ community, for your engagement, your encouragement, and of course, your rally, which is how we recognize, appreciate, learn, love, and take care of you as you work to make the world a more just place. I'm your host, Dr. Erika Tate, and this is Remix EQ Live. See you next season.